It might be now.
Test, test. Ooh. Okay. Here, let me hold that down.
All right, thank you.
Test, test, test. There you go.
Okay.
Perfect.
You're
All
good,
right.
you're good with this.
We got this. We got this.
Yeah.
Ready, Mark? All right.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Sorry for keeping you all waiting. Apparently there was like some traffic or something. Who would have thunk it, right? In Southern California, there'd be traffic.
Right, exactly. And not only in SoCal, right, Mark?
Only in SoCal.
All right, well, let's do this. First of all, thank you so much to everybody who's here, everybody who came out. Obviously, everyone here in this room, y'all know NWO for life. Everyone here, I'm sure, is a fan, and it is something that's captivated us as pro wrestling fans, the NWO and the entire story and just everything that took hold in the professional wrestling world. So when Mark said that he was going to be writing this book, I thought, oh my God, if anybody can put this book together, it is definitely Marc Raimondi. So, ladies and gents, please give a warm welcome to the author of Say Hello to the Bad Guys, Marc Raimondi. Mark, congratulations.
I also said, oh my God, when I had to write this book because the book is a very scary thing, so.
Well, let's go
Thank you
ahead.
for that intro, though.
Yeah, man. Let's go ahead and start right there.
Absolutely.
We were talking just now about the vast history of the NWO and everything that it did for professional wrestling. When you decided, let's start there.
Yeah.
How did you decide that this was going to be your subject matter, that you were going to step in and write this book about the NWO?
Good question. Thank you. I would say like it's kind of a long story, but it started as I've been a wrestling fan forever, right? Like my entire life, and for a very long period of time, I've told people that wrestling's everywhere. Wrestling's everything. Everything's wrestling, and a lot of friends here that I have would back up that I was saying that for many years before this book ever became a thing, right? And then I wrote about the NWO going into the WWE Hall of Fame for ESPN. And that was in 2019, and a year and a half later, I got an email from an editor at Simon & Schuster, and or at least someone claiming to be an editor at Simon & Schuster. I was a little confused, and I wasn't sure what that was all about. Thought I was maybe getting scammed. Maybe like a Nigerian prince was trying to steal my money or something. So it was just like random cold email, right? And this editor read my article about the NWO going to the Hall of Fame, and I guess thought it was good enough and passionate enough to turn kind of a book, turn it into a book. And that was just a cold email in May 2021, so over 4 years ago now. And that was pretty much it. And then I was like, yeah, of course I want to do a book about the NWO. How do I do a book? that was kind of the next question.
Okay, so you said, how do I do a book? How did you do the book? Where'd you start?
I had to hire a book agent to do that, and then I had to write a book proposal, which is like kind of like a smaller version of a book, which took me like almost a year to even do that. And then yeah, Simon & Schuster paid me to write a book. I mean, what the hell? Like, are you serious? That's pretty crazy.
All right, so when you sat down, pen to paper, where did you begin and how did you decide, hey, this is where I'm going to start, this is where the story is going to start, and who do I have to talk to? Who are some of the people you talked to for this book? And you can just start there.
Yeah, so the first thing that I did when I got the email was I wanted to reach out to Eric Bischoff. That was like a really important first thing to me because I figured you can't really write a book about the NWO without interviewing the creator of the NWO. So I reached out to his team and I met up with him in May 2021 in Jacksonville, Florida, Double or Nothing weekend, back when he and AEW were doing okay. They were not at odds at that point. So he was there for the show, and I sat down with him at a Dave & Buster's in Jacksonville. And we talked for probably just 20 minutes, and I kind of told him who I was and what I wanted to do, and I asked him, can you help me? Can we sit down and chat? And he said, absolutely, whatever you need. And he completely followed up, and he completely followed through with that, and I flew to his home in Cody, Wyoming 2 years ago, and we sat down and we spent 2 days together. He took me to his home, I met his wife, we sat down and we talked for hours and hours and hours, and it was really a great experience, and I really can't thank him enough for being so cordial.
Were you surprised by that he took the time to give you 2 days to be interviewed and really talk about this entire story and the whole ride?
Somewhat surprised just because he didn't get anything out of it, right? He wasn't getting paid, it wasn't one of those, it wasn't a transactional thing other than just kind of spreading the message of the NWO and kind of spreading the information about that time period. So somewhat surprised by that, but I've also heard that he's pretty kind, like behind the scenes, and I've heard from people that he's really cool, and he was very cool.
So when you go back and you think about your fandom, your pro wrestling fandom, where does it begin, and how did the NWO impact your life, Mark? For you specifically, going back and thinking about just all of it and everything, how do you look back at that time?
I became a fan of wrestling in 1990. I'm pretty old, y'all. I mean, it's been a minute. So I was 5 years old, and I don't remember exactly how I came about finding wrestling, but I remember Hulk Hogan versus Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania in 1990, and that was my first memory of being a fan. And then I just became obsessed with it, the early 90s stuff. And it's in the book, and I remember having an argument with my Uncle Joe in 1991 when Jake the Snake, Damien the Snake, bit Macho Man's arm. And I remember telling my uncle, it's real, it has to be real. I saw it with my own eyes. The snake bit the man's arm. How do you fake that? And he was like, it's fake. I'm like, it's not fake, it's real. It's real. And so I remember having those conversations over the years with people, and I do know that it's predetermined now, by the way. It is still real to me to an extent, but and then the NWO was such a pivotal moment just in wrestling and also culture, because wrestling is not the coolest thing in the world, y'all. I think you know that, right? Being a wrestling fan, there's a stigma to it, and there certainly was that in the early 90s being a fan. But when the NWO happened, it was cool. It was people were into it. The cool kids at school were into it, and you had to be into it, right? You couldn't miss Raw or Nitro because that was the cool thing to do. That's what people were talking about in that time period. So it went from being very uncool to one of the most important things in pop culture almost overnight. So, in school, that's what we talked about, right? I mean, but you're a little bit young to, how old are you?
I was going to say, I was way younger than you, Mark, sorry.
I'm old, Denise. Thank you very much for
I know, but no, it's almost unfair though, because I'm I didn't get to live to that time period where, I'm in school and getting to experience the buzz of the NWO. So for you to get to experience that in school.
Have youth on your side now, though.
Yeah,
I no longer
that's
do.
true. But no, to get to experience that in school, talk to us about it. Just we mentioned how impactful it was in the pop culture and phenomenon where suddenly pro wrestling is cool. What was that like?
I remember so Bash to the Beach in '96 was in July, right? So I remember going to, I was at a day camp, and I grew up in Queens, New York. So I remember going to a day camp the next day after Bash to the Beach, the Monday morning, and Hulk Hogan just turned heel, and everyone at this camp was talking about that. It was the biggest thing. It was counselors were talking about it, kids at the camp were talking about it, parents were talking about it. It was so huge. I remember it vividly. And I don't remember a lot of things from when I was 11 years old, but I remember that vividly, being there, talking about that. That's how big of a deal it was, because Hogan was a really recognizable name in America, not just in wrestling. He was very famous. He was the household name, and he was a good guy. He was the good guy, the American hero. And then he turned bad, and it was a milestone moment for people, as far as entertainment, in their childhood. It's like a formative moment. Hulk Hogan turning heel.
And even when John Cena turned heel, everybody was comparing it to that. And of course, people that were well, you can't compare the two. There's no way you can compare the two. Do you feel like you can at all compare the two?
So I actually said that I thought that the Cena heel turn was bigger when it happened. I was wrong, by the way. That was not true. That didn't age well. So it felt bigger to me in the moment because of who was involved. John Cena is very famous. The Rock is extremely famous, and so is Travis Scott. All more famous than Hogan, Hall, and Nash were in '96 as far as that goes. So I thought that moment, and also how viral it went on social media. And I remember in '96, I know that you're young, Denise, but there was no social media in 1996, so you really couldn't.
Dang.
Viral was not really a thing, except for getting a cough at school. That's so I thought in a vacuum, the angle itself was really big. Who was sharing it? MLB was putting it out there on social media. So I thought it was huge, but the follow-up has not quite or really even come close to what the NWO was, right? The NWO was this all-encompassing storyline for years and years in WCW that, did a ton of business, turned around the entire wrestling industry, really, because the industry was struggling at that time. After the steroid trial with WWF, and WCW was, by far this #2 promotion, kind of the second-rate promotion in many ways. So it was it really changed everything, and it led to the Attitude Era, and that was the biggest boom period in wrestling history, at least in our lifetimes.
So when you were writing the book and putting everything together, was there, because we know the stories, right? We've heard the stories, we know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
For you, what was your favorite part to actually write and do the additional research? What did you think was like the most thrilling aspect of putting this book together?
It's a really hard question because I actually went back and I watched over 500 hours of WCW for this book, and I'm actually still married, believe it or not. After all those sorry, Win. After all those hours of WCW, that was, especially like in 98, 99, it got a little rough. But so I did a ton of research, and it's really hard to pinpoint just one thing because there were so many like incredible moments. I always go back to like the trailer area attack backstage at Disney MGM Studios, where people were calling the switchboard at Disney wondering what the hell was going on. They thought people were really getting attacked, like cops showed up and ambulances, and it was really a time period where now everything is so like out in the open, and like breaking kayfabe is so common. But back then it was like you really didn't know what was real or not, because there were elements of it that felt so real, especially compared to like what was on WWF at the time, which was like the Body Donnas and Phineas and Henry Godwin and TL Hopper, the wrestling plumber, and like the Goon, the wrestling hockey player. That was on WWF, and then WCW was like Hogan, Hall, and Nash like beating people with bats and like powerbombing folks through tables, and like that was dope back then, and WWF was not.
What was the hardest part for you? You mentioned your favorite part to write, but what was the hardest thing that you found? Not just writing, but maybe just when it came to like the research aspect or like finding an angle for the story, because we've seen so many stories, we've seen so many people talk about this.
Yes.
There's countless podcasts, there's all of this. So when you're trying to find a new angle to present this, would you say that was the hardest part, or what was it?
Yeah, no, that was actually the hardest part for sure. So it's really important, like, and you know this because you're a content creator. It's really important to kind of like know where your target audience is, like who you're trying to reach with something. And this is a unique book because you're right. There have been so many things written and said about the NWO and that era of wrestling. So a lot of the hardcore fans know a lot of the stories already. So I was trying my best to find out, new things and new details and, new angles to take, and it was difficult to do that, right? Because there are all these podcasts and documentaries and whatnot. So it was important to me though, because I am one of those fans to bring that to the table. So I was able to, one of the coolest things in the book I think is I was able to find the woman who designed the NWO logo, who no one knew for almost 30 years. Like no one knew who this person was. And no one thought I could find her, but I guess I did. And that's in the book.
I was like, wait, how'd you find her?
It's a long story.
I was going, well, you need to know what page that is on, because I can't wait to read that part too.
It's in chapter something, I don't even remember. Yeah. But that was I mean, just being, having an experience as a reporter helped me, obviously. As a journalist, I've been doing that for a minute, so that helped. But yeah, it's kind of a crazy story. It took figuring out. So they did it at Disney MGM Studios in Orlando because they could not get to Atlanta because all of the production trucks were taken up by the Summer Olympics in '96. So everything they were doing at that time in July '96 or so was all at Disney MGM Studios. So where that trailer attack happened, right? So they basically had to go across the street to the Disney MGM Studios like post-production office and find someone there who could do a logo, because they couldn't just do it at their office in Atlanta. So they found someone to do the logo, and it was 3 WCW producers who went there, and they had just an hour. And they were like, hey, can we just make something real quick, for this new group? Not really knowing exactly how big it was gonna get, right? They knew that, it was gonna sell t-shirts, right? That's why they wanted the logo, but they didn't know how much, they didn't know how many. So they went over there, and a woman who was 27 years old just whipped up the logo in an hour, and they left, and no one remembered who she was. No one knew what her name was. And I asked the producers who were there with her, can you give me a clue? Was she blonde? Was she brunette? Anything? Any distinguishing, features? And no, they didn't really know. They didn't remember. They were she was in the corner of the office. Okay, thank. Well, that doesn't really help me very much. So, going to the whole story?
Go for it.
You all got an hour? What's up, Jeff? So I did everything I could to find out about that post-production office. It was called Disney Ideas. And I managed to find an article in the Orlando Sentinel from 1995. and it had the name of the general manager of that post-production office in the article. So I managed to track her down, and I called her on the phone, just cold called her one day, 30 years later. And she was like, "How did you get my number?" I'm like, "I'm a reporter." And I asked her, like, who would have made logos for you guys in 1996? She probably thought that I was completely out of my mind. And she was right. But she's like, it could have been this person or this person. Try finding this person, they can help you. So then I tried to find another person. And then that person was like, hey, this person might know. So I had to find another person. And then as I'm going through, like, this is like, a few weeks of time. And then someone told me that it was one of two women. And so it was, I forget this other woman's name right now, but they were like, it's one of two people. So I found one of them, and she was like, I don't think I did the design. I don't think it was me. She didn't even remember, right? It was a long time ago, right? So she was like, I don't think it was me. So then someone randomly, because I was like actively searching for this person, someone posted on literally the most specific Facebook group in the history of Facebook. It was literally titled like, post-production people from Orlando in the 90s. That actually exists. You can look it up. That's a real thing. I did not make that up. So someone posted like, hey, this, someone's looking for this person who did the NWO logo, and it was a post-production person from Orlando in the 90s. Do you know who it is? And people started commenting on it. And one person commented, I think it was this woman, the woman that I found that said that it wasn't her, or Jenny Sloan. And the name that I was told was Jenny Hines. So I was looking for someone named Jenny Hines, not Jenny Sloan. Turns out that she got married. I was looking for her maiden name. So I couldn't find Jenny Hines, but I did find Jenny Sloan, and I found her number, and I texted her, and I said, hey, how you doing? You don't know me, I'm writing a book, but does this logo mean anything to you? And I texted her a JPEG of the logo, the NWO logo, of course, and like 30 minutes later, I get like a ping on my phone, and I look down, and it said, yes, I designed it. And then I interviewed her for the book, and she was really cool. The first thing that she said when I talked to her on the phone was, so how many t-shirts did they sell? And I said, Jenny, you don't want to know. Because she didn't see a penny of that revenue at all.
Oh my
If no one remembered who she was, I mean, it was just a Tuesday for her, right? And we're all wearing that stuff 30 years later. I mean, that is insane, right?
But she, she clearly knew the impact and everything, and was she just shocked?
She didn't actually know how big it
didn't.
got. No. She must have been living in a bubble since the 90s, where I guess she's not running in like a wrestling, circle. She's like a real estate agent now in Winter Park, Florida.
Wow.
But she said that she thought it was really cool because she got to tell her son that she did like a logo that was, important in pop culture, and her son actually recognized it. He didn't know what it was exactly because he's younger, but he kind of recognized it, and she was like, yeah, I did that, like in a past life, because she's no longer, a logo designer or a post-production person. She's a real estate agent.
And now she was being interviewed for the book, telling her story, and I'm sure that must have been a really cool experience for her. You helped make that happen, Mark.
Yeah, I hope so. I can't help her with the money part though. Sorry, I can probably get her one of these cookies that Nicolette made.
Hey, I was gonna say that would be pretty cool to do. But okay, so you mentioned tracking her down, and that the story was incredible. Just the fact that you were able to piece all of that and connect all of the dots. Talk to us about some of the other portions of the book where you were like, I know you talked to Sean X Pac Waltman, who's really cool. Talk to us about those people that you got a chance to speak to, and all of these wrestlers that have lived these lives that you're just like, wow, and historians. I know you spoke to Dave Meltzer. I mean, there was just a lot.
Yeah. I mean, everyone was really, really helpful. I sat down with Sean Waltman. He lives in LA, and I was living in LA. We sat down like a diner in Eagle Rock for hours, and he just had no problem telling the whole story of what he was doing back then. And Conan was great. Sat down with Conan at a Brazilian steakhouse in San Diego, Fogo de Chao. I paid. Come on, Carlos. Everyone was really, really, helpful. It's hard because it was so long ago, right? And people's memories do fade. It's like I can't remember what I had for breakfast. I'm asking them hey, what happened on July 8th, 1996? I don't know. So that was a challenge at times, right? But everyone was so cool. I interviewed some really unique people. I interviewed Jay Leno. for this. You know, remember he wrestled in '98? That was kind of crazy. I found the producer of The Tonight Show from the '90s. His name is Gary Considine. And I tracked him down, I called him, I interviewed him. He was very, very nice. He was a big wrestling fan. And at the end of the call, I was like, hey, I don't know if you're still, you know, cool with Jay, but if you talk to him, maybe you can, you know, slide him my number. I'd love to talk to him, you know, for this book. And he's like, yeah, I'll give it a try. And you know this as someone who, you know, who creates content. That never works out. Like, that never works. No one is ever slipping the number, right? So I forgot about it after that. And then literally like 3 days later, I'm just sitting at home on my couch, like working on the book, and I got a call from an unknown number. And I answered, I'm like, hello. And it's like, hey, it's Jay Leno. And I'm like, of course, that voice is so distinct. I know exactly who you are, Jay Leno. You gotta try to introduce yourself. Like,
All right, so Jay Leno calls you. What do? You're like SpongeGuard trying to figure out what to do.
First, I was like, oh shit, I gotta record this. So I have to like get my app, like, hold on, Jay. I gotta like get my app going and record it. And I'm like, shitting my pants. Can I say that in Barnes & Noble? Is this, sorry, there are children here. I apologize. Denise being one of them.
Okay, so I mean that's just so awesome to hear you be able to share all of this and tell us how you were able to get these stories. So what was the most surprising story that you did hear that you thought, oh man, I can't believe I'm hearing this? Like first count account stories, like to hear that. What was it for you?
There are so many of them. One of my favorite parts of the book was I was able to interview Ellis Edwards, and that's not a name that a lot of people know, like just by name, but you know his work. He was the guy that every time Sting rappelled down from the rafters, he was the stunt coordinator setting that all up, and he did that every single Monday night. So I was able to, he still lives in the Atlanta area, and I went down there a few years ago, and I sat down with him, and we talked for hours, and you know, he really told me like the ins and outs of like how they did that every single Monday night. And the first time they tried to do it, it was like in the middle of the night before Nitro. It was like very, very early on a Monday morning, like 2 a.m. I think they were in Boston. It's in the book. I forget. But they're in Boston, and they feel like they got it. Like they feel like we have it ready. They were gonna use a sandbag as a trial, as like a tryout, right? The sandbag was like 250 pounds. Similar, like Sting was around that weight, so they figured like if it held the sandbag, it could hold Sting, right? So it's like 2 a.m. They're like, we think we got this. So they called Sting and Bischoff to the arena. They came out of bed from the hotel. They were probably Bischoff was probably at the bar. They came to the arena and they tried it, and it went boom. It fell all the way down and it smashed and it went everywhere. And at that point, Sting was like, oh. Yes. To hell with this, I am not doing it. He ended up doing it, of course, and they got it to work. But the first time, when I talked to Sting on the phone, he was like, it was actually kind of a morbid thing to say, but he was like, I was almost Owen Hart before Owen Hart, and it's kind of a scary thing, but it's true. Like if he would have been the one testing it, they could have gone very badly. I still can't believe they did that every Monday night for like years. Like how did they get away with that? That's dangerous. They did it from a helicopter one time. Are you kidding me? That couldn't happen now. There's no way. The 90s were different, y'all. The 90s were crazy.
Well, and one of the things that we saw a lot of crazy stuff happen in WCW. When you watched your 500 plus hours and going back and remembering so many things, what were some of your favorite moments, favorite things that you saw happen in WCW, whether it was specific to the NWO or not?
I mean, the undercard was actually a whole lot of fun in WCW back then, right? Like, I actually enjoyed watching that as much as like the main event scene in the rewatch, because you know there was like guys like Chris Jericho and Eddie Guerrero and like Dean Malenko and Rey Mysterio. I mean, they were putting on like bangers like randomly. The commentary team isn't even like talking about the match; they're talking about what's going on with the NWO, and Rey Mysterio was doing like a 450. You know, it's like, but it was really cool to see that, and those guys never got pushed, but they put in like maximum effort. So I had to like watch like La Parca. I had to like stop. You know, I could have fast forwarded, right? I could have, but I probably should have, because you know. My wife probably wanted to murder me at that point, 400 and something hours in. But I was watching that Dean Malenko Rey Mysterio match. I'm sorry, Wendy. I have to check that out. Super Callow was dope. Sorry.
I think what we got from this is that Wendy deserves a shout out for letting you spend all that time to do that.
she's the real MVP for sure.
So, Mark, this was you obviously you have such a long time reporting. You covered combat sports. You've done the thing. Now you're with Eden. Now you're covering the Falcons. Like you're doing a whole lot, and you've done a whole lot when it comes to writing. But this was your first book.
It was.
And to write a book is no easy feat. If it was, we'd all be writing books. What was for you the biggest takeaway, or like the biggest thing that you learned? Did you think it was hard? Did you think it was easy? Because I mean, it looks difficult. It really does.
Just time management. Just having structure. And Wendy will tell you that I'm a very structured person, like almost to a fault. Like I need to know when things are gonna happen when. Like all the time, and I guess that was helpful for me for the book because I was covering MMA. I was covering Chris Cyborg, who's back here somewhere, and that was I was busy, right? I had a lot to do, but I had to find time to write, a book. My first manuscript was like 110,000 words, like when I first filed it in December 2023. So I had to figure out, when am I going to do all this stuff on top of covering MMA and a little bit of boxing and a little bit of wrestling too, a little bit of WWE stuff. So just time management, being on the road, covering the UFC event and getting up early on a Saturday when the event starts at 6 and writing for 2 or 3 hours, before that, and just that type of thing. Time management is key, and stay hydrated. I always say stay hydrated. Water is very important.
I always heard writers, whether they do music or books, that they have a special place, whether it be a special room in the house.
The bathroom, of course.
For you?
I mean, I'll write anywhere, but if I had to choose, I mean, really wherever. I mean, it's just where writing the book. Someone got a comment, Ray? All right. Yeah, I mean, really whatever was available to me, I had to write. Right, I had to write a lot of freaking words, so I couldn't really be that particular. I had to freaking write.
Yeah, I remember that.
The Queens is coming out of me now as we get talking. Yeah.
I remember we would run into each other at a couple of wrestling shows, and I'd be like, "Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
Yeah.
How's the book coming along?" You'd be like, "Oh man, I didn't even know what you were saying. You were just like this whole time. I'm like, oh, he's losing his mind now."
Yeah. It's
but
true.
no, that's awesome, man. So now for everybody here, whether they've read the book, whether they haven't yet, what is the thing, or for everybody watching on the live stream too, what would you tell them to say, hey...
Oh, we're live right now?
Yeah, we're live. We've been live, by the way.
I've been cursing up a storm, Denise. Why didn't you tell me?
We're live, pal. All right, it's happening.
All right, yeah.
Okay, so what would you tell to everybody to say, hey, make sure to say hello to the bad guys, to get the book? What do you want to tell them?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, the biggest challenge was kind of the demographic and the audience. And I was trying to write for three very different separate kinds of people. One was the hardcore fan, one was the Laps fan who was a big NWO fan or a big 90s wrestling fan that no longer watches, and there are many of those people. Because I got an NWO hoodie when I started writing this book, and I wore it on every road trip I took to cover MMA and whatever else. And man, 90% of the time, someone at the airport or someone on the road recognized the logo. And these folks are not watching wrestling. They're not watching Raw. They're not watching Dynamite tomorrow night, right? But they remember watching the Monday Night Wars and the NWO. And I really wanted to write this book for them too, because it's nostalgia, right? The 90s were such a formative time for so many of us, for better or worse. And then there's the non-fans, the non-fans who are wondering what is it about wrestling? Why are people into this? It's the people who think that, who just say oh, it's fake, right? I hate those people, by the way. I mean, I can't curse. Yeah, so that annoys me particularly because I believe it really is a tremendous art, on so many levels. And I wanted to write for people who, in order to kind of explain why we love it, why it's important, how it changed America, how it influenced things. The Rock is the biggest star in Hollywood. There's a guy that's in the White House right now who is in the WWE Hall of Fame. And it has touched a lot of parts of our lives. I mean, I see wrestling everywhere, right? This is how we started the conversation. I think there's wrestling everywhere. And I wanted to also write it for those people. So that's kind of my spiel about, the three different types of people that I wanted to write the book for, and hopefully they pick it up.
Before we go on to the Q&A section,
yeah.
I do want to go ahead and ask you, how do you think, because I mean it's been so many years now, and wrestling fans, we still love to talk about the NWO, we still love to talk about WCW, and as we press on and the years continue to come, how do you think people will look back at this time period in pro wrestling?
You mean the current or back in the 90s?
Yeah, specifically for WCW, for the NWO.
I think I think as long as people like me, I'm 40, and we remember it with such fondness, such affection, I think that as long as we continue kind of spreading the word about 90s wrestling, and I think younger folks, and there's some younger folks here, look at my man right here in the front row. How old are you?
25.
Jesus. So how old were you when the end of the start? You weren't even alive yet.
I probably was around when, Sean was in it. And,
that's
they had
not
that
WWE, that's not the real.
Yeah,
But that's what I mean. Like as long as like we continue to kind of pass it down to the next generation, like anything else, I think will still be looked at, in a cool way. You can say what you will about that era of wrestling. There were the good and bad part, but it was so freaking big. I mean, it cut into Monday Night Football's audience. Like 10% of like Monday Night Football lost their audience because of the Monday Night Wars. That is like insane to think today, right? So that's how big it was. It was massive. It was pop culture. Like you needed to watch Raw and Nitro, in order to really like be a cool kid at that point.
Wrestling is cool, guys. Wrestling is cool. So we want to take a chance right now to open it up the floor to anybody that has any questions for Marc. Please just raise up your hand and I'll send over the microphone to you guys. Who wants to be the brave person to go first?
Sophia. I'm just kidding.
All right, right over here. Your question.
Hi, Marc.
Hi, Sean.
Longtime fan, first-time question asker. When you were approaching this book, how did you decide on where you were going to start the story?
That's a good question. So I think the important thing about the book, especially again because I wanted to also be accessible to non-fans or lapsed fans, I had to establish the characters. So I started with establishing the origins of Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Eric Bischoff. To me, those are kind of like the main characters of this story. So that's where I started. I started with like explaining, hey, who are these people? Where do they come from? And they all have very distinct and like unique backgrounds. I mean, Scott Hall, he killed someone in self-defense when he was in his 20s. And that shaped like the rest of his life. And I thought that was really important to kind of like tell the story not just of the NWO, but who these people were.
Anybody else who wants to go next? All right.
Kind of the funny thing about the NWO is that it never actually had a legitimate ending, right? It just kind of fizzled out, and in my opinion, that's kind of what started the steep decline of WCW because it was so hot for like 2 years, and then it just kind of there was no ending. It just fizzled out, and then it was obvious very soon after. That's when WCW started steep decline, which eventually led to its eventual demise. Yeah, it was. I haven't read the book yet. Is that kind of touched on?
Yeah, in fact, the book ends the same way, just like in the middle of the sentence. Yeah, no, totally, man. Like, it is one of those things where they were still like doing good business for a long period of time, even when the creative had lagged. And they just felt like, hey, if we just keep trotting out like the 3 letters, we'll still continue doing good ratings and good gates and good pay-per-views. That was not the case, obviously, right? So I would say, like, I always say that, and it's somewhat controversial, I always say that the end of like the real NWO story, like what it was supposed to be about, an invasion, a takeover, that ended when the Wolfpack split off. That's how I feel. Because then it no longer became, hey, we're trying to take over WCW. Then it was like just a wrestling storyline with 2 factions going against each other. So that's kind of like where I would say it ends. But Starrcade '97, Finger Poke of Doom, there were definitely some hallmark moments where things were definitely going downhill.
All right, we got a question up here.
25. Gosh.
I think about WrestleMania 31 when NWO came out and DX came out, right?
Yep.
Now, I don't know if did DX come before NWO or it came after.
You really are 25.
Yeah, I really am. My question is, do you believe that D-Generation X made a similar impact to NWO, or NWO made a bigger impact than them?
I think the NWO made a bigger impact, certainly. DX was really popular in the 90s for sure. I mean, I do the crotch stop all the time. And my wife hates it. I mean, she freaking hates it. But people are still doing the crotch stop, right? Joel Embiid from the 76ers does it like every season and gets fined. So it's still like very much like a part of like American culture that Sean Waltman so graciously handed to us, the crotch stop. But as far as like the NWO, like the business, the industry of wrestling was struggling for the NWO. In like the early 90s, WWF had the steroid trial, so they lost a lot of money on that. They took a big hit to their reputation because of that. And WCW was just, they were never really doing that well financially until the NWO came along. So you can make an argument that the NWO kind of almost saved wrestling in a sense. And then if there's no NWO, does it how does Vince McMahon react? Does he create the attitude era? Do they do things, edgier and grittier and more violent and all that? Does that ever happen? Does Stone Cold Steve Austin ever get big? Does The Rock ever get big? Does he ever become the biggest, star in Hollywood? It was all, to me, because of the NWO. That really is the catalyst for all that. So yeah, certainly, I think the NWO did. As fun as DX was, and don't get me wrong, I'm still gonna do the cross chop, but I think the NWO has them beat in that regard.
That's awesome.
All right.
I have to.
Hi, Mark.
Your hair is just extraordinary.
Thank you so much. After doing all your research, did your perception of the NWO change? And if so, how?
That's a really good question. I don't think it did entirely. I think that I look at it with a new perspective, like what I was talking with Earl before about when the Wolfpack split off, and I'm just like I'm watching it over again and knowing what I know now about wrestling, right? I'm like, well, when is the big Hogan Nash match gonna happen, right? Hogan versus Nash was the match in '98 to do. The Wolfpack splits off. It's led by Kevin Nash. NWO Black and White is led by Hulk Hogan, right? Where is that match? It never happened. So I'm watching it back and I'm like, it's pretty obvious that stuff is going on behind the scenes that is affecting this. And that was a little bit of like a new thing that, as a kid, you don't know. You don't know what's going on. You don't know that people are playing politics. You don't even know what politics are behind the scenes in wrestling. You just think it's, entertainment on Monday nights. So looking at it back, it was like, there was a lot of things that could have and maybe should have happened with the NWO that could have extended it or sustained it to an extent. And it just never did because of like political machinations behind the scenes.
Do we got any other questions?
Hey Mark, you're a G. Thanks for doing this. First off.
Thanks, bro.
But I have a good question. So you said you spent a couple of days with Bischoff, right?
Yeah.
So obviously during that time, Bischoff was taunting Vince.
Yes.
Every week.
In
And you
'98.
said you watched like 500 hours.
Yes.
So on WWF, you would get Shawn to throw the too sweet. And on the other side, you get the other guys that throw the too sweet.
Mhm.
They go right back at you, HBK. I think
That's
Kevin
right.
Nash said that a few times. How close do you think Vince really was to going on Nitro?
Not that close. I don't think close at all. But I will say that, so Bischoff told me that Hogan and Savage told him that they thought that Vince was going to answer his challenge. Because remember, he challenged Vince McMahon on Nitro. Like, come to, we're going to be in Massachusetts, that's near WWF headquarters, come to Slamboree on pay-per-view, and let's have a real fight.
Yeah.
And Hogan and Savage told Bischoff that Vince is going to do it. Like, he's going to show up. So Bischoff actually came up with like a strategy if they did get into a fight, because he felt like he had the karate background. Vince was a bigger guy, older, so he was gonna like chop down the legs, and try to use McMahon's. I'm serious. He told me this. I was sitting at his bar in Cody, Wyoming, at his place. He had a few glasses of alcohol. I'm not gonna put it out there like that, but he told me that he had a strategy for what would happen if Vince actually showed up at Slamboree that year, '98, and he felt like at the time that he would have no problem, beating Vince in a real fight, in a shoot fight. But he says now, after knowing Vince and getting to know him for years, he's not as confident now with knowing Vince that he would actually win that fight or not. So we'll see. Maybe Dana White can put that one together now.
Okay, just quick question. During the time that you were writing the book, Scott Hall actually passed away. Did that change the project at all, or add anything, take anything away?
Definitely one of like my biggest regrets. Although of course it's no one's fault, and it sucks because I was a big Scott Hall fan, right? And I thought he was a genius. But I told Denise before that I had to do a book proposal, right? So actually, that's kind of like the pitch to the publisher, to show that you actually could do a book. And I still didn't know if I could, but I finished the proposal on like a Friday, and then by the end of the weekend he had passed away. So I was like gonna try to talk to him, and actually I had talked to Sean Walton already, and he was gonna help me, get in touch with Scott Hall, and of course it didn't end up happening. So that's a bummer, just horrible timing on that one.
Do we got any other questions?
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Carlos.
You were talking about how you felt that the split was when they went to the Wolfpack.
Yeah.
Bischoff mentions that he felt when he fired X-Pac and X-Pac went to PS. Do you feel that was the time, or more when it was the split between the
Those things are extremely related to each other, because when Bischoff fired X-Pac, Sean Waltman, whatever, that pissed off Hall and Nash so much that they really kind of like shut down after that as far as like helping out with creative and coming up with new ideas. And that almost like necessitated the split because Nash and Hogan were not on good terms in '98. And they were not coexisting. And like I like it was almost like the Wolfpack was almost like art imitating life because those guys really hated each other at that point. So it was almost like they were splitting in real life and they split on the screen as well. So those things are very much related to me. So I kind of see them as being hand in hand. The Wolfpack becoming a thing and X-Pac going over to WWF getting fired.
Do we got any other questions?
Jay? Oh, sorry, Jay. Yeah.
This is not a lot of questions. This is a comment. I just want to say I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
I love you so much.
Aw.
Just like the
Don't make me
NWO. For life. I love you for life. And I just want to say thank you to all the people that is here today. It was a long road with you. You know,
Told
through
you.
this book. You know, I remember you every morning in your big pajamas with watching Hours or WCW.
Yeah.
I still have the theme on my head.
Yeah.
And yeah.
She like knew who was coming out by like the end of it. Like, oh, that's Diamond Dallas Page's theme. You know, she knew about like the entrance music.
Yes. And I remember, this is a little bit of a story, but the first days that I had with Mark were like wrestling shows. And I remember,
Very romantic.
but yes, I remember by the end of the trip, like he told me in Spanish, you want to be my girlfriend, ¿tú quieres ser mi novia? And I say yes. And
That was after going to 3 straight days of wrestling in Mexico City.
yes.
Yeah. So that was trial by fire for Wendy. Yeah. And that's when I knew that I was gonna marry her, pretty much. Yeah.
Yes.
If she could survive 3 straight days of lucha libre in Mexico City with me, she's a keeper.
Thank you, Mark. And my English is getting better.
Your English is great.
Thank you so much. I just want to let you know, guys, thank you so much. I learned to read English just for being able to read Mark's book. And I'm so proud of you, Mark. And just wanna say it. And I love you so much. Te amo for life.
You gotta follow that, Jay. Wow.
I also want to say that I love you. Okay, I'm legit. My question is, did you go into this book with any preconceived notions of anybody you interviewed who happened to be different once you got into it?
Ooh, that's a really good one. You know, I do a lot of interviews, right? So I try not to kind of judge how things are going to be until they actually happen. So I don't know if I did. I think that people were really kind, you know, as a whole. And I talked to like almost 100 people, and I talked to people that like, a lot of people said like, how did you find me? And I'm like, well, you know, I gotta write a book. I gotta find you. That was a big thing. And also like, I don't remember what happened in 1996. That was 30 years ago. That was a lot of that. But overall, I mean, Bischoff is definitely a much nicer person than maybe his like public persona is, because he really just gave me all the time that I could possibly need to talk to him. Kevin Nash was a little bit difficult to chat with, but I was fully expecting that, by the way. You know, first time I texted him, I was like, "Hey, Kevin, you know, hey, Kevin, you know, I work for ESPN. I'm writing this book, and I want to chat with you." And he's like, "Well, I don't work for ESPN. Why should I talk to you?" Just Kevin Nash stuff. But I don't. That's fine. Kevin Nash is great. I'm a big fan of his, and no ill will there at all. But yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, it's wrestling. It's a crazy world, and you kind of go in not knowing, and you kind of have to be prepared for the unpredictable, and that's kind of my mindset.
Do we got any other questions? Going once, going twice. All right. I was gonna say, yeah. All right. I think we're a wrap then. Before we close off, though, Mark, I do want to give you the opportunity to do some closing remarks and tell everybody whatever you want to say.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say thank you for coming. That's really the most important thing. It really means a lot. I know that a lot of folks came from LA, and the traffic was really miserable, and it was rush hour, and Huntington Beach is a hike, so it really means a lot that you guys all came. It really does. This is kind of a big day for me, I guess, you know, in many respects, and you never get your first book. I may never write another one of these damn things, if I'm being honest with you, so this might be the only one. Thanks, Denise. But yeah, just thank you, and a lot of people in this audience, mean a lot to me. I have a lot of friends here, that have known me for a long time, and it just means a great deal to me that you guys came out to support me. So thank you. Yeah.
What do we do now?
Priscilla.
I thought you had already writing another book.
Who's looking at that?
We're gonna jump into our signing, so if you guys want, we do have.
Do you want me to keep coming?
Thank you. Oh yeah, I'm gonna give some close-ups as well.
Okay. And grab a photo with Marc and Denise, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.
All right. Marc, before I close off the stream, can you tell people we're still live? Yeah, can you tell people are watching? Can you tell people where they can buy your book?
Okay, yeah, for sure. So it's available right now everywhere you buy your books: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, your local independent bookstore. It's everywhere. It's online. You can probably go and get to the brick and mortar and grab it too. I know that most Barnes & Nobles are going to be carrying it in store. So yeah, check it out. I love professional wrestling. I think that a lot of people that are watching the stream probably also love professional wrestling. And this is kind of like my love letter to pro wrestling. So I hope you all pick it up. Again, it's available now. And thank you so much for the support, everyone.
Thank you, Marc. All right, and then here we go. Thank you so much to everybody who watched the live. We're gonna wrap now because your girl is about to get a cookie. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna want to get
cookies.
into that.
You
Yeah.
see these cookies?
I haven't even shown the
This is
cookies. Look at
insane.
this.
Look at this.
Beautiful.
These
Beautiful.
are incredible. These are incredible.
Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you all on the next one. Bye, everyone. Make sure to say hello to the bad guys.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.